Jewel. You don't need to know who I am, but you should know why I'm here. My grandpa, Stephen, is an author of a new exciting play called When the Break Happened in Orangeburg County. It's about our ancestors from when the break happened in 1865 until now. Many of my relatives are featured in the play, from my great-great-great-grandpa Stephen to my great-grandpa Stephen to my grandpa Stephen. Guess what my uncle and cousin's name are? Stephen. Go to www.thebreakinorangeburg.com to learn more. An online store has been created to honor those relatives and other families with products featuring the Break logo. Go to www.thebreakstore.com to purchase items today and help to produce this play, please.
Welcome to a new podcast show about stuff. It's the show about stuff, the Stephen Davis Show. Here's your host, Stephen Davis.
Welcome to this week's episode of the show about stuff, the Stephen Davis Show. Did you have a great week? Today, my guests are the famous McBroom Sisters. Who are they? You're going to find out in a minute. Hello to the McBroom Sisters. How are you doing today?
Hi.
You're very well.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Durga, you're out in California. How's the weather out in California?
The last couple of days, we've had some very torrential storms that have caused some very problematic mudslides up in the mountains in a lot of areas, and hail in the San Fernando Valley, which is quite unusual. But aside from some real heavy downpours in my neighborhood, it's sunny now at the moment. So we're lucky.
I asked the same thing of my guests last week, Starletta Dubois and Margaret Bush-Ware, and they said, oh, it's a great day out here. Must have been some changes.
Well, that's the one common thing about weather. It changes.
Now, in order to start our adventure, I'm going to let each one of you all talk about yourselves, and we're going to start at the eldest, whoever that might be, since you all look the same age.
Marsha is the eldest. I am the eldest.
She paid the cost to be the boss.
Okay, Marsha, you start off. Tell us about yourself.
Okay, I'd like to start off by saying I'm very happy to be here with some of my sisters on the podcast. And we've had a very eclectic and unusual life, all of us, I must say. And I started off, let me see, as one of the pioneer African-American dark-skinned models in the 70s. And that was quite a big deal. But even before that, I was dancing with Katherine Dunham with my sister Dana. We danced at the Metropolitan Opera House at the Old Met and the New Met at Lincoln Center in Aida, which Miss Dunham choreographed. And then Miss Dunham took me to Paris for 6 months to dance in a musical comedy called Deux Anges sont venus. And so I learned a little French there, which has come in quite handy over the years. And then I ended up doing some movies. So my big movie was Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. And I played the part of Petronella Danford, who was a drummer in an all-girls rock group. And that was directed by Russ Myers. And it was very interesting because when I look back at that movie, it was very progressive in the sense that, one, it was a girls rock trio. And then here I end up with two sisters who end up as real rock singers. And then my oldest son, Jeremiah Hosea, is a bass player. So I thought that was really funny that I play the part of a drummer in a movie, and then I end up with a son who's actually a musician in real life, and my two little sisters ending up with the voices of life singing around the world. So it's funny how life imitates art, and art imitates life, and it's all interconnected. Because I then ended up dancing in Israel for 4.5 months in Jesus Christ Superstar with Norman Jewison. So we were in the Negev desert and all over the country doing that film for 4.5 months. And then I ended up doing a few other films, Come Back Charleston Blue, Legend of Nigger Charlie with Fred Williamson, the football player. Go Long and the Traveling All Stars.
So long, she was the love interest for Billy D. Williams.
I want to ask you a question before you
Yeah.
go on. How did it feel when you first met Katherine Dunham the first time?
Wow. She's our surrogate mother, actually, because
Okay.
we had a lot of contact in the sense that I actually lived with her in Carbondale. She had a house out there, and she had sent me out to teach her technique because she was working with young people to get them into Southern Illinois University. So with Miss Dunham, it wasn't just learning her dance, but it was a whole philosophy in terms of a lifestyle, a way of living. It was so beautiful. It really was very special for Dana and myself.
I have to tell you, I want to add to that because our coming into her into her dance and into her technique happened in a very funny way. My mother, Marie McBroom, who went to Juilliard School of Music and was the first accompanist for Harry Belafonte, by the way.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and she was also secretary to W.E.B. Du Bois as well. But I had just gone with my mother to Katherine Dunham's office that she had at the Chelsea Hotel. She was living there and giving classes. And I just went with my mother because my mother was going to talk over the tour of the company and how she was going to book their tour and what have you, because she had a travel agency. And I was just waiting in the anteroom of her office while my mother was meeting with Katherine Dunham. And her assistant, Lucille Ellis, came out and threw some leotards at me and said, a class is getting ready to start. And I was like, I'm not here to take class. And she said, your mother's going to be a while. Get in that class. And that was the beginning of the saga. I think I went in and my mother said she had two daughters. Marsha came and we started taking class. We both took to it so well. She gave us scholarships to the school. And then she opened a school on 42nd Street. And that was an experience because when she opened that school, Miss Dunham was also a voodoo priestess. She invited voodoo priests from Haiti. She invited santeros from Cuba, Arsenio Rodriguez, the blind guitarist. It was incredible. And all the musicians, I can't tell you the number of musicians that were there. And they did the whole killing of the guinea fowl and the singing, but it went on all through the night into the next day. It was quite just a total immersion into Afrocentric culture and music. The people that we met there that came through the Dunham School were absolutely incredible. Marlon Brando just wanted to just be there to work her elevator so he could be around the school. She discovered Eartha Kitt. It was quite an exciting thing. As a matter of fact, she had me go on the road. She did a show with Eartha. I think Eartha's last big musicals that she did. It was called Peg, which took after Peg of My Heart. Anyway, we went on the road. I went on the road with Eartha, and she introduced us to some tremendous people all through my mother, because my mother was always into something.
Yeah. And
But
it was
now-
so funny. I'll never forget my Sweet 16 party. Ms. Dunham had Arsenio Rodriguez and Charlie Mingus play at my Sweet 16. I was like, oh my God, why do I have these old men playing for me? And Ms. Dunham said, you'll see one day and Charlie Mingus and Arsenio Rodriguez playing for you for your Sweet
Wow.
16.
Charlie Mingus had a big crush on my mother. I remember seeing him running outside in the dead of winter, chasing my mother down the block, begging her to just please talk to him. My mom was something else.
I knew his son a long time ago. He used to live on the east side. I used to go over to his house for something. I don't remember what it was because as you get old, you start to forget things.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to ask you, and I think that all of you all can join in this question because you all have a common thread in terms of that, is your father. Talk about your father a little bit.
Dr. McBroom, while you were talking, I'm looking at Durga. My parents got divorced, but my dad still loved his daughters, even though he left New York. He had a doctorate that he got at Columbia University. And at that time, it was difficult. Even African-American men with PhDs were not as respected as they should be. He went out to Los Angeles. I was just starting junior high school. Marsha and I decided we wanted to spend some time with our dad. So we decided we were running away from home.
Columbia University is where he met our mother, Lorelei and I's mother.
Who was your mother?
McBroom was pretty much
Woman.
credited the first Black American woman with a private cardiology practice in the United States,
Oh,
and first woman of any race to do graduate studies in medicine at UCLA. So she was quite the trailblazer.
what a great
And-
crew to have on for Women's Month.
When we ran away from home, it was funny. I'm looking at Durga, and I always call Durga my maxi me. And I just wanted to say this about Durga because I look at Durga and I remember her sitting in her crib trying to put on her clothes that belonged
The
to her,
Barbie's clothes.
her doll's clothes. And she was trying to force her foot into a little tiny doll's shoe as she sat there singing, "It's been a hard day."
Daddy told us he was an assistant to the professor that they both had at Columbia, and that he only had one slot to send one last student to UCLA. And he was trying to decide between our mother, Fletcher Pearl, and this other student who was a white lady. I've forgotten her name now. So he said, please send the Black one. We need Black doctors. And my mother had been discouraged prior to medical school to even go into medicine. They told her, oh, you should be a nutritionist. That's what your people need. She put all that aside. She was very quiet, very studious, straight A student, but she sailed her way through it, crying very often when she'd come home because of the discrimination. There were no women's dorms, none of that. But he was a real rock for her through that period and continued to encourage and support her to becoming an MD.
I'll never forget one time there was a woman who had a cardiac arrest and Pearl brought the woman to. And then when the woman regained consciousness, she looked at her and started yelling, oh my God, what is this Black, you know what, doing over me? Am I in hell? Am I in hell? I'll never forget saving someone's life. And then they look at you and start screaming and cursing at you. It was just outrageous.
Yes, they really stood up to and fought through some extreme racism in order for us not to have to fight so hard. And for that, I will be eternally grateful. Not to mention the fact that all of our parents really encouraged us to become people of the world and to travel and to gain the experience that world travel gives you and not be stuck mentally on the farm as so many people growing up when we did were. And for that, I will be eternally grateful. I just have to point out something, Marsha. Great minds think alike. I'm sitting here looking at my necklace here. But what I'm wearing is a set that was made by Lorelei. Lorelei makes jewelry.
Yeah.
This is, if you can see,
Yes,
jewelry by Lorelei with the matching earrings here.
Such a talented family.
Lorelei's up next. She
Yeah.
needs to tell you about herself.
To say a little more about our father, because that was your question, and
Yes.
there's so much to tell. I wanted to say that he was a triplet and the other two died. And so he was considered sickly as a boy and was raised on a farm away from the family until he got stronger. But he was the first in his family to go to college of 13 children. And he encouraged and always worked hard to keep his family together. And he did the same thing with us. Even though Marsha and Dana had a different mother, he taught all of us, it doesn't matter who the mother is, you all are brother and sister, whoever. Because we also have a third set. He had a third wife, Kathy, and she had finally 2 sons and our little sister, Laura. So that was a really important element to me about his personality, as well as the fact that he had a brilliant mind. He knew Eleanor Roosevelt and worked with a group of college students that she had come to the White House, and they remained pen pals. He debated Malcolm X, representing the Martin Luther King philosophy on the Joe Pine radio show. He ran for the Board of Education. He wrote columns. He was a psychologist. He was supposed to be a speechwriter for Bobby Kennedy because of his ability to write such great speeches. But Bobby was killed.
We was right there in the room when Bobby got killed. And I'll never forget Daddy saying a woman came running to the door in a polka dot dress and she said, we got him. But then the men in black came to my father's house and said, you did not see that woman. You did not hear what you thought you heard. So Daddy never talked about it publicly till towards the end of his life. But he is quoted in a book that was written about Bobby Kennedy's assassination. And they did quote Daddy for 2 pages in the book.
There is on YouTube an interview he did with Mr. Shelton Walden from WBAI Radio. He did an intense interview about the Robert Kennedy assassination. I have to say, between our parents, we feel very blessed. I feel blessed even with our stepmom, because when Marsha and I ran away from home and went to Los Angeles, we were there with Pearl, and she was our mother for that time while we were out there. I will never forget when my father passed away, all 3 wives were at his funeral service. I said, oh, he has the African ceremony. He's present at the services. It was so loving and so wonderful. We were talking earlier about my laughing, but that's what my father said. He wanted me to tell a joke to people every day in his name. He didn't want a service that was indoors. He said he wanted to be out of doors, and he didn't want anyone dressed in black. So here we were all on the bluff on the Pacific coast. Everyone's beautifully dressed, and people would come, oh, this looks like a great affair. What is it? And I've always said my dad put the fun in funeral.
Where we were, the spot where we were is on Point Doom, which is a promontory out in Malibu. And I chose that spot because according to the Chumash Indian legends, the Chumash were the predominant tribe of this area. There are portals along the coast of California where the veil is thinner so that the spirit can pass through to the other side easily. And one of those portals is in the spot where we had that service, all dressed in African garb, which was quite colorful. And what I was holding up here, you can't see it because of the reflection, but it was a plaque given to our father from the South Central LA and Watts Chamber of Commerce. As he put it in his interview just following the assassination, when Senator Kennedy was shot, as he put it in his inimitable fashion, people were running around, defecating and vomiting on themselves and urinating. They were so upset. And as a psychologist, he did what he could to calm the crowd and quell the situation. And so they wrote, in memory of Senator Kennedy, presented to Dr. Marcus McBroom, in memory of Senator Kennedy, your quick action in a time of crisis is a credit to your profession and to the world.
My mom was also, of course, in the entertainment industry, but my father was such a drama king. It's beautiful because I think that has helped us all in terms of us as performing artists. He had a smile that would just light up the room when he walked in. And it's funny because when he and my mom married, my mom being the first wife, it was one of these things that you might see in it today. I guess it would be all over, but the limo and the streets in Harlem packed with people up and down.
And I must say that during World War II, our father actually worked with Eleanor Roosevelt, because a lot of people aren't aware that our military was still segregated during World War II. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget our sister Laura and myself, we found a little article when we were going through his papers stating that he got injured in Burma because he didn't fight in Europe, he was in Asia during World War II, and he got injured in Burma, and Miss Roosevelt had him flown out because she was fearful for his life from our own troops.
But that wasn't just by chance, because remember what happened. This is why we're all very spiritually connected. Daddy had a dream the night before that he was supposed to take a helicopter transport out from that place in Burma. He said his dead aunt came to him and told him, don't get on that helicopter.
Wow. So
he pretended to have overslept. And sure enough, 15 minutes after it was up in the air, it exploded in the air. So they were planning to bump him off. Because of his efforts to help with integrating the armed services. It was after that flight blew up that Eleanor sent her own transport to bring him back home.
And that would have been a tragedy for the world, because none of you all would have been here.
Another little tidbit about the war. That picture that Durga's holding up is the house where we grew up in Los Angeles with Daddy. I have to throw this in that because I have a website, and someone was looking for a way to get this letter to me. He was a man who collects historical documents. He had gotten a hold of a letter that our father had written to the White House specifying that in his training, he was being trained for the military in Mississippi, that they were whipping the soldiers as a punishment. We have a copy of it. It's in my storage in LA. And so he got moved out of there. So that was another thing that he was doing in terms of reporting to Eleanor what was going on and how the Black soldiers were being treated. Because obviously, as we know, anyone who studied any history surrounding race in the World War I and II, because of the segregation, and Vietnam for that matter, it wasn't the same thing about segregation, but who was on the front line.
There is an actual book written called The Slaughter, and it tells of a military base in Mississippi where they actually massacred the troops there, the African-American guys, because they came from all over the United States, and the local people thought that they were too uppity. So one night they went in and just massacred everybody and then told their families that they had died in battle overseas.
Just think of this. I grew up in a military family. My father was a lifer for 30 years. And one of the places that he was stationed at was Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And in the 50s and 60s, they had a sign as you entering the town that said, help stamp out communism, integration. The Ku Klux Klan had a sign on Highway 301. And these were the same soldiers that was going to have to go to Vietnam. This is how they were greeted. So I fully understand what you're saying.
Other issue is that our dad was also at Tuskegee, and in light of what we know that they've done, everyone's wondering why so many people of color are leery about getting vaccinated now. Of course, the news is out about the Tuskegee experiment, but we just have to thank God that my father was not a smoker, he was not a drinker, but he was a man who loved women, and women loved him. And he was saved from these experiments because some white woman at Tuskegee took a liking to him and was always running up, throwing her arms around him, so they shipped him out.
Real quick, I want to get back to you all talking about yourselves.
I did a lot of historical things. For example, I did a lot of album covers when I was a model. So I'm on a cover of Freddie Hubbard's Black Angel. I did 2 covers for the Stylistics. I did a cover for Lalo Schifrin, 2 covers for Van McCoy, who wrote The Hustle. And so I'm on Disco Baby, and then another cover for him, and several magazine covers. I was very excited when I went to the African American Museum in DC. There's a paperback book that I'm on the cover of called The Black Woman, and it's a group of essays written by different African American women writers, and that little paperback made it into the museum. So it was very exciting to go to the museum and see that there. I remember yelling, and the guard came over, oh my gosh, is that you? And everybody wanted to take pictures, and I know Lorelei and Durga went with Miles, my nephew, and they took a picture by the display.
Not only is it in the museum, it's also on the list that Jada Pinkett Smith just put out as essential reading. I have to say, I've had a wonderful career in entertainment, but a lot of that is due to Marsha, my older sister, my career in entertainment on many levels.
I'm going to get to you in a minute, because I want people to know the song that you wrote. But Marsha, are you finished?
I designed a breastfeeding poster because I was extremely upset about Nestle's promoting infant formula for poor women around the world, or any women for that matter, because it's always breast is best. And I had done a very popular commercial for Lux soap in Nigeria. And so I decided to beat them at their own game and have my own breastfeeding poster, because in the commercial, my name was Susie Martins, and I was supposed to be living this rich lifestyle with being whisked away in a white Lamborghini and singing to integrated audiences. And I had this Caucasian servant. When I left the stage, I just handed her my little wrap. Susie Martins doing a breastfeeding commercial poster would be very powerful for these women, because they were promoting that, oh, modern women don't breastfeed. So I designed the poster, and then I donated it to UNICEF. They sent the poster all around the world to promote breastfeeding. The New York State Department of Health contacted me and asked me if they could put it in all the clinics in New York State. And here it is, my children are now grown, but the poster has still survived in certain places, because even one of my daughter-in-laws said to me, she went to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital and she looked up and she said, oh my God, there's my mother-in-law.
I put a picture of it on the webpage for Marsha. I made a family tree, and there's pages about all of us, some connection there.
I was on the board of the New York Metro Committee for UNICEF for many years, and I was on the board of the Girl Scouts, and I have my own not-for-profit organization called For Our Children's Sake. Over the years, I've taken young people to Africa. It's been incredible. I became a teacher after I left showbiz and taught high school history until my retirement. My mom worked at the United Nations when we were little, and she would get invitations to go to opening independence celebrations, and she'd always say, oh, I have to bring my daughters with me. So we ended up going to Africa when we were children, and that's why I just developed an incredible love for the continent, for the motherland. And they were all Pan-Africanists. My mother also worked for the Rosenbergs, who got executed for being communists. We're always around people of great note. I'm sure Lorelei and Durga have pictures of my father with all kinds of stars in Hollywood. Just that kind of family. We were always there in the mix with the rich and famous.
My mother was laughing because she said so many people ask her, how did she get to know all of these famous people? She said that the reason was she would get invited to many events and she would be the only person of color there. She said people would strike up conversations with her on the food line when you're waiting to get food at these events. And they would find her so interesting, and they would keep in touch with her over the years. Marsha and I have always been in horror buffs. Years ago, we joined the science fiction book club, and part of the membership, they gave you a ticket to the first commercial flight to the moon. And I really wish we had still had those tickets. But my mother came home from an event one day, and she used to laugh because when I was younger and anyone would ask me where I was from, I would always say the Twilight Zone.
The kids in the neighborhood believed us because we would go on these trips with my mom to Africa, so they didn't see us for months.
One day my mother comes home from a party and she's telling Marsha and I, oh, I'm so sick and tired of these white men always chasing me. And she said, because there was this one guy, she said, in every party, he's at every party lately, and he won't leave me alone, and he keeps chasing me around. And she said, and they keep telling me he's somebody, but I don't know who he is. And we said, well, what's his name? Rod Serling.
Now, I want to get through letting each one of you all talk, and then I have some questions. Dana, I'd like for you to talk about yourself.
As Marsha did, I also, whenever I was not performing, I was in education. I taught at Adelphi University for many years. I was brought away from Adelphi University, where I was their library liaison for the African American students. Arthur Mitchell came out to perform out at Adelphi. They hired me away from there, so I ended up teaching at the Dance Theater of Harlem for many years. I taught Dunham technique and I taught mime. Now, I didn't really want to teach mime, but I studied mime with a gentleman who had studied directly with Marcel Marceau. So I was a very good mime artist. The class of mime that I taught at Dance Theater of Harlem, some people from Cirque du Soleil came and hired my entire class and took them to Las Vegas. They were doing some show called Black Angels. That was very exciting.
Now, I must tell you all that you all have had such illustrious careers. We might be here for the next couple of hours.
Each one of us could take up an hour.
Now, I said that a lot of my entertainment career was due to my sister Marsha, because Marsha was always looking out when something would come up. Now, you mentioned about a song that I wrote.
Yes, the song.
And fortunately, to this day, I'm still getting royalty checks from that song. That's a very good thing. But that happened by chance because Marsha and I were visiting her good friend and fellow model at that time, Grace Jones. And Grace was getting ready to go down to Compass Point to record an album. And she was very upset because her babysitter had just quit. She said, how's she going to do this? She had her young son. And she
who happens to be my godson.
It was January. And since I was teaching at a university at the time, we always have January off for our winter break. And I had just had my daughter, who was just about the same age as Grace's son. So I told Grace, wait, I'm off for the whole month of January. I'll go down with you and I'll take care of the babies and you can record the music. So we went down to the Bahamas and I lived with Grace during that time. Chris Blackwell was the producer of her album. He had this beautiful sauna in a cave on the beach in the Bahamas. So we're sitting there in the sauna. And I just happened to say to Grace, I said, I wrote a song. I have to tell you, I wrote because I had been teaching at Adelphi. One day, come around the West Side Highway and be a block from my house. But that day, there was some blockage on the highway. So I had to get off at East 42nd Street and drive cross town to West 42nd Street. I had been teaching dance all day. And by the time I got into my garage, I was too tired to get out of the car. And I was sitting there and I'm like, you can't just sit here vegging out. And it was like, as soon as I said that, that's why I said it's about spirit. Because as soon as I said that, this song came to me. I was sitting in the garage and there was a sign on the wall that says, pull up to bumper. Literally sat there. At that time we had Walkman. And the song just came to me and I sang it into my Walkman. I went and I copywrote the song. And it was like a year later that I was in that sauna there with Grace. And she said, sing me this song that you wrote. And as soon as I sang it to her, she said, that's the most fantastic song. Now, I have to tell you, this is what's funny when I talk about spirit, because I didn't know that much about the music industry at that time. And I was really willing to sell her the song just outright for $5.
Oh, God, no. That would have been
Yes.
horrible.
But when I got home, she said, have your lawyers call my lawyers. So my lawyer started calling and her lawyer never returned the call. And next thing I heard it on the radio and they hadn't made any legal arrangements with me. And my lawyer said, look, I keep calling. Their lawyers are not returning my call. So I'm going to send you to Martin Silfen, who taught music law. And all of the music lawyers in New York had studied with Martin Silfen. So I went to him and he said, that song's climbing up the charts. He said, and you have sheet music on that song. So even if someone did it as a jazz tune, they've got to pay you. So he said, don't say anything until it gets to number one. It's very interesting how things turn out because, of course, they had to end up making arrangements with me. And I didn't want to be greedy because I was very happy that Grace did the song. So I ended up sharing the publishing with she and Sly and Robbie. And so I'm still getting royalties. But the interesting factor is that some years later, I'm at a travel agency event with my mother. And it's on a yacht and there are all sorts of tables there and all sorts of places to sit. And I see these two little white women sitting in the corner. So I told my mother, let's go sit with those women. And she said, what's wrong with you? Look at all this space here. What do you want? I said, I don't know. My spirit's telling me to sit with those women. We go over and we sit with these women. We start talking and one of them happens to say, oh yes, my husband is a music attorney. And oh, he had this client, Grace Jones. She says, yes, but that was some of the most horrible years of our life because he got all caught up in drugs.
Oh no.
I found out why her lawyer never returned them. It's so funny because we're in that time where things are often revealed to you at the most unusual times. Just like I think about Lorelei, because I used to babysit Lorelei so many times when she was little. And I don't even know if she remembers when we even went to Cape Cod. We used to go to Wellfleet, Massachusetts. And Lorelei was such a little naughty girl. She was always running around. She'd hit people. She would kick people. And when they left me with her to babysit for a while, I would take a cap full of wine and put it in her bottle.
Oh, I don't remember.
She used to get on the furniture and leap off. Is trying to scare people. Lorelei,
I've got the best one. We had a series of babysitters because our parents were professionals, so they were working during the day. We had this one lady who Lorelei got mad at her because she wanted to watch her soap operas when cartoons were on in the afternoons. And so Lorelei was like, I'm going to fix her. Park, that picture I showed of the house, there was a park across the street. And Lorelei found this huge feral dog feeding in the trash and grabbed it by the collar. She knew this woman was terrified of dogs. She goes, look what the woman. I walks up and just changed the channel. So we got cartoons that day. Yeah, it's funny because Lorelei was really nasty when we were kids. And then now she's all polite and nice. And I'm the.
I was just getting ready to say, your image that I'm looking at, you are so cool, calm, and collected.
She was my favorite because she was always getting into so much, and I just thought it was hilarious. It was like watching a show. But when she started singing, I was friends with Nile Rodgers at the time. So I was able to introduce her to Nile Rodgers. He produced a whole bunch of songs for her. Both Lorelei and Durga are phenomenal singers.
Matter of fact, I've been telling everybody to go to YouTube and tune into Black Floyd and see their incredible video, Wish You Were Here. I just adore that. And the research that you guys went through to put that video together is really phenomenal. So everybody should go to Black Floyd and see the video that Lorelei and Durga put together.
I have to say that Dana's introducing me to Nile introduced me to a whole world of the best level of professionalism that I could have been exposed to. And I feel that's been one of the greatest benefits as far as my exposure in the music business. I was able to meet people like Nile and other musicians that were just the A-level people from when I was a novice. And then they took me under their wing, and Nile gave me session work, and eventually we did make a record together. But being able to meet people who are A-level professionals, it's just a completely different feeling. They're not insecure, so they're not competing with you. They've already proven themselves, and they tend to be more available to teach. And Nile taught me a lot of things about the importance of having a certain image, how you interact with the public and your fans, how you interact with the people in the record company. So many great things. We spent a lot of time together, and I will always appreciate Dana for introducing me to Nile and giving me that opportunity to be able to work with him. He cut songs on other people for me. He hooked me up with Philip Bailey from Earth, Wind and Fire.
Okay.
So I'll tell you that story after. Yes, and I wrote something that Sister Sledge recorded that he did for me, but I'll share some of that. I have a cute story about Philip Bailey.
Well,
Okay. I will tell you all that I have, at the spur of the moment, decided I'm going to make this a 2-part episode so that you all can get your stories out.
I wanted to bring in something else because it's so wonderful, Sisters Helping Sisters. Another wonderful opportunity that Marsha presented to me was a movie that I did with Gordon Parks, a film called Leadbelly. About
I remember Leadbelly. Yeah.
Roger Mosley. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So not only was I in the film, but I got the opportunity to choreograph the film as well. And my association with Gordon Parks was one of the most wonderful things. And the funny thing was that Gordon gave that script to Marsha, and Marsha read the script and read the character and said, "This is my sister."
Yeah. It's nice to have sisters with different personalities that you could throw off things to.
It was very funny because when I went to the audition, I just went in to read for the character. I did my reading, and Gordon told me to wait outside in the anteroom with all the other actors who were there. So I'm sitting there waiting, and then all of a sudden, and listen, those were the days when we were quite risque. We were all wearing see-through clothing and what have you. I had on a t-shirt dress that went down to my ankles, but I had nothing else on underneath it. Gordon came out, and he comes over to me, and he says, "All these other actors are telling me what a great choreographer you are." He said, "Would you mind choreographing something for me right now?" And I'm like, okay. And Art Evans played Blind Lemon Jefferson in that film with Roger Mosley in Leadbelly. Art had his guitar, and he said, "Go in that other room and work out something with her." I went in the room with Art, and I choreographed a little piece. I came out, and I danced up a storm for Gordon. He said, "You have the job. You're the choreographer for this movie."
Let me ask you, is this Gordon Parks or Junior?
Our senior, our black,
Okay.
I always used to call him our black Hugh Hefner, because he had so many women in his life, and he was so wonderful. I almost wish, that's one of the things I said, if I had my druthers, I'd start a finishing school for young African Americans, because Gordon would have parties and he could invite all of his wives and all his former, because he knew how to treat women so well. I remember he took me while we were doing the filming of Leadbelly. he took me out to dinner one night, and just as part of the conversation, he was asking me what kind of wine did I like, et cetera, et cetera. And we had our dinner. I went home and he went home. The next morning, early in the morning, my doorbell rings. I open it up and there's a gentleman delivering an entire case of the wine that I told him I liked. Yes,
Wow.
that's the kind of gentleman that he was. And he was a gentleman. He just knew so much and taught me so much, because the day that we had to shoot the dance sequences of Leadbelly, and this is a Paramount film, full feature film, Bruce Surtees was the cameraman. And I'm waiting for Gordon. He said, "No, you're the choreographer. This is your day. I want you to direct this entire day." So I got to direct a feature, a whole 2 days of a feature film for Paramount Pictures. That was an incredible opportunity. And he also was very particular about all of the actors. I had one scene on horseback with Roger, but Gordon didn't let us just do that one scene. Because we had this one scene, he had the studio give us all riding lessons. So that was another great thing through Gordon Parks. I got riding lessons. I was acting with a phenomenal cast. People don't know that Gordon Parks Sr. was also fashion editor for Vogue magazine. So when we had to do the costume design for Leadbelly, he came to every costume fitting. He wanted all the clothing authentic to the period. And even myself as choreographer, it was really great, because since it was a period film, I did a lot of research to find out what type of dance they were doing at that particular time in history. And I remember they sent me to a hairdresser who was doing my hair, and I was telling them that I was doing this choreography. And they said, "Oh, was that supposed to be in Sweetport, Louisiana?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Damn, my granddaddy's from Sweetport, and my granddaddy's 90 years old, and my granddaddy can still dance. I go set up a meeting with you and my granddaddy." The grandfather came and did some dances for me. Between the Dunham technique, because Dunham didn't just do her Haitian and Afro-Caribbean, she also did jazz and black bottom and all the dances of the period. They only have the one big dance sequence up at the top of the film, but those were actually 2 dance sequences that they put together, because when Gordon finished cutting the film, I think it was like 4 hours long. So they cut them down. But Harry Heyward, who I also have to mention, Harry Heyward was the film editor. He and my husband, Franklin Mano, were the first African Americans in the Film Editors Union. My mom again came into play. Franklin was trying to get a job and trying to get in. They kept telling him he's not in the union, he's not in the union. A friend of my mother's was head of United Artists at that time, and she called him and he wrote a letter for Franklin. Franklin got an interview and he got into the Film Editors Union. Then he wanted to work at CBS, and every time he called, they'd say, "Oh, sorry, you're not here." So I told Franklin, I said, "Next time you call, there's a pay phone booth right on the corner of CBS. So you call from that pay phone booth. And if they tell you if you could only be there now, tell them I can be there now." They ended up hiring him, and he worked at CBS for over 30 years until he retired. He was also a film editor, and he was the assistant editor with Harry Heyward on Shaft. He also edited a film for Woody King. You mentioned Woody King, that first movie that Woody King did, History of the Black Theater Movement.
Yes.
That was my husband, Franklin Mano, who edited that film and put that film together. Woody came to him with a script, and Franklin threw the script in the trash can and told him, "Woody, just leave me the footage and go away and I'll make a movie."
Oh, there's one thing though that I wanted to get in, because as I said, there's so many different facets to all of us. I coordinated a week of cultural events for the United Nations when they had their special session on Africa. And it was really quite remarkable. I worked with the committee, but it was so great to have us presented, African people in the diaspora. And I coordinated all kinds of events at the United Nations, featuring Caribbean poets. We brought over one of the most famous African filmmakers, Ousmane Sembène, and showed one of his films at the United Nations. and it was just an incredible experience.
That relation
So-
that Mother gave us
you know.
of working at the United Nations was quite wonderful because Marsha and I were actually sitting in the General Assembly when Nikita Khrushchev took off his shoe and was banging it on the podium.
Oh, so full of history.
We were very blessed, but I also have a foundation called PACA, which is called Passing Ancestral Knowledge Along. And so we've done dance and theater and film. And as a result, I actually directed a play that was at the United Nations in the Dag Hammarskjöld Theater there called Millennium, that was on HIV/AIDS, called St. Mark's Place. And it was so well received. So we've had this long running relationship with the United Nations.
I did a Blues for Mr. Charlie.
You did that with me on 42nd Street, my 42nd Street Repertory
Mhm.
Theater.
Also, I toured Europe with Ellen Stewart from the La Mama
yes.
Theater from East Forts. And we toured all across Europe doing dances from the original Cotton Club.
Now you come to Durga and Lorelei.
Next week, Part 2, Lorelei and Durga, the McBroom Sisters. Thank you for tuning in this week. Hope you enjoyed this show about stuff. See you next time.
When will the last time be the last time? Or will enough be just enough? When will the next mile be the last mile? Don't matter, we know that we're tough. When will your last word be the last word? When will we cast aside these chains? When will the last one be the last one? 'Cause we are counting up the names.
Botham Jean,
Janet Wilson,
Bobby Ross, Betty Jones,
Kaylin Rokert,
Maya Hall,
Eric Reason, Natasha McKenna,
Akai Gurley, Tatiana Jefferson,
Alton Sterling,
Ayana Stanley Jones, Amadou Diallo,
Breonna Taylor,
Clifford Glover, Darnisha Harris,
Dante Parker,
Catherine Johnston, Derek Scott,
Kendra James,
Dontre Hamilton, Malissa Williams,
Eric Garner,
Miriam Carey, Eric Harris,
Pamela Turner,
Ezell Ford, Rekia Boyd, Laura Bland, Jerame Reed,
Chantel Davis,
John Crawford III, Shelley Frey,
Laquan McDonald,
Tanisha Anderson, Michael Brown,
Tarika Wilson and her 1-year-old child,
Nicholas Heyward Jr., Taisha Miller,
Philando Castile,
Yvette Smith, Philip White,
Charlena Lyles,
Remain Brisbane, Michelle Cousseau,
Sean Bell,
George Floyd, Stefan Clark,
Rashard Brooks,
Tamir Rice, Alteria Woods,
Terrence Crutcher,
Alexia Christian, Tony Robinson.
Walter Scott,
Just in the past 8 years, nearly 8,000 Black people have died at the hands of police. Say their names again and again because Black lives matter. They must matter, and they do matter.
when will the last time be the last time? Or will enough be just enough? When will the next mile be the last mile? Don't matter, we know that we're tough. When will your last word be the last word? When will we cast aside this chain? When will the last one be the last one? 'Cause we are counting up the names.
When my aunt passed away, I felt unprepared. Not having a healthcare plan made everything worse. I didn't want this to happen to me. I wanted to make healthcare choices with my family and came across Comfort HOMESAKE. They specialize in making space for people who need to talk about beliefs and values around serious illness. I like their inclusive approach.
Ababio's story of transforming the loss of her son into a powerful legacy inspired me. I shared her story in a chapter of my book, Lost to Legacy. Called Saying Yes, it reveals loss as an opportunity for discovering a deepened appreciation for life.
The more I learned about Comfort HOMESAKE, the more I was drawn to them.
We went for my pacemaker upgrade that morning. When the doctor came in, I met her for the first time in person. She was speaking to my daughter Bianca instead of looking me in the eye. She made me feel invisible. All of a sudden, I became old, and I'm used to being my own advocate. I could convey whatever I wanted to about my health.
That happened to my aunt too, and I'm volunteering with Comfort HOMESAKE to make sure it doesn't happen to other people. Comfort HOMESAKE has some great programs that teach how to prevent unwanted medical treatment from happening to your loved one. Volunteers can also train to support community in a number of other areas. I went looking for information and ended up responding to the call for volunteers. Now I help others. It was the best decision I ever made. You should volunteer too. Visit comforthomesake.com today.
I'm Ali Sharif. Telehealth is the future, and Comfort HOMESAKE is recruiting volunteers and serving seniors and caregivers in the fight against isolation and loneliness.
Branded gifts for the holidays, birthdays, or just because. Visit us at www.thebreakstore.com. Hit the right black Get in Touch button.
I got my copy of 6 Days in December, My Father's Journey Home by Carlisle G. Leach. Do you have yours? Get it today on Amazon.